Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Raden Safinatul Aula, Wiji, Kinasih, and I'm here to present you about my research paper, which titled Students' Perspective on the Political Aspect on Aula and Airbender. In my presentations, there are several parts of explanations that I will do in my presentation. The first one is introductions, research questions, literature review, empirical review, research methods, findings, discussions, and I will end my presentations by explaining about the conclusions. Okay, so let's move on to the introductions. Okay, so cartoon. Cartoon is an animated series that every people have seen at least once in their life that may or may not change their life and can be enjoyed by every age group. Since it's a cartoon, a lot of people have this stigma that its only purpose is entertainment. Since it's true that that previously cartoons were created solely for the purpose of entertainment. However, cartoons are now widely employed for a variety of other purposes. In addition to providing amusement and fun, cartoons are now being utilized to educate and raise public awareness. For instance, cartoon movie like Turning Red, which was released this year, have a moral lesson to impress adolescent girlhood. Also, help us to understand more about who we are. Not only Turning Red, but there are also Avatar: The Last Airbender that have a message behind it. Despite its categorization as a children's cartoon, Aula warns against the dangers of war while also demonstrating depth and lessons that adults can learn from, which makes Aula is the perfect cartoon to raise the students' political awareness. Of course, Aula is an interesting subject to be researched on, and several people already done the research on Aula. For example, in 2019, there is a study conducted by Dara Poisner that performed a thorough-sectional study of the shows, institutions, and areas of society, illustrating how it reconstructs repressive systems and pushes for social justice in order to show how Aula works as a moral education. And because it is already becoming something that can affect our life greatly, political awareness is important for the young generations, especially students. Therefore, the study is conducted to see how much the students learn about the political aspect from the story and gain awareness of the situations in Aula. And moving on, I will talk about my research questions. There are three research questions. The first is why the Fire Nation is being hated so much. The second is what are the right strategies in ruling a nation that should be implemented. And the third one is what are the fears political view after watching Aula. So moving on to the literature review. I got three literature reviews here. The first one is the definitions of politics and its aspects. Politics in its broadest meaning is the process through which individuals create, maintain, and alter general norms that govern their life. The second literature review is the definitions of political awareness and its benefits. One of the great philosophers, Plato, states one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your influence. Many people may have been turned off to the idea of becoming political conscious after witnessing someone playing politics or attempting to manipulate others to political ends. But if we have political awareness, we could be kept away from those things. We could be kept away from other people's manipulations. The third one is cartoon as a tool for spreading political awareness. Cartoon is one of the best tools for spreading political awareness, especially around the young generations, because not only it is interesting and inspiring, but it's also a lot easier for the young generation to understand political cartoons than book or newspaper. Someone has already conducted a research about how cartoons could be easier to give to the children for young generations to gain more understanding. Okay. Next is moving on to the empirical review. I got to empirical review here. Okay, so the first one is a study about Aula from Dara Poisner. And she was a third year at the University of Guelph, pursuing a major in English when she wrote this research. Her research title is Avatar: The Last Airbender as a Moral Education. It found about Aula successfully instills a sense of liberal morality among its viewers. Avatar skillfully uses children's potential receptivity to impart liberal attitudes and the show becomes a medium for humanity. The second empirical review is from from Baylor University. It is her thesis in 2021. The title was Exploring the Philosophical and Cultural Significance of Avatar The Last Airbender, that found about the show's realistic portrayal of the human nature and modern social challenges, and it could be considered as a philosophical literature teaching viewers on the complexity of life, ethics, and Eastern and Western philosophy. So, after the empirical review, moving on to the research method. The writer realized that this research needs to use the qualitative study. And so the researcher used qualitative study in researching these issues. Not only that, the researcher have four university students from the same major, which is social and political science, and from the same from the same major, which is international relations, to be the candidate of this interview. And so the researcher followed to them and conducted an interview to gain data from them. The interview was conducted through a Zoom platform, and the researcher gave an open-ended questions to the participants. So, moving on into the findings. In findings, I have three headings. The first heading is first impressions. In here, I have a question about what do you have in your mind when watching Aula. Based on the interview result of four participants, all of them at first only sees Aula as a cartoon for entertainment since they watch it in their childhood and nothing else. The participant one say that at first because he saw the show on his childhood when he didn't know politics, and now he just thought that the cartoon is cool because they can control the elements. The same statements also come from participants 2, 3, and 4. Nevertheless, as time goes by, all of them began to understand and realize what message that Aula carried, and they each had a different impressions when they watched it again. Participant 1 thought that Aula correlate more with the government and social conditions, and participant 2 realized more about the views on society that exist in Aula, also exist in real world. Okay, so moving on to the second heading, which is the substance of Aula. In this heading, there are three questions. The first one is, what do you think about the governmental system that portrayed there? The second is, who do you think started the system? And the third is, do you think that the system of United Nations with one region, like the Fire Nations one, could be implemented in real life? Based on the answers of the interviewee, they have quite the same perspective on how they see the government's portrayed in Aula. All of them say that every governmental system in Aula is really diverse, just like in real life. Participants were to say that I believe that they portrayed the cartoon from the Japanese war, and the Fire Nation is like the Japanese when they want to unite Asia. In the governmental side, it's more focused on its military. That the air tribe, they portrayed the Tibet tribe, which they didn't have any military. And another thing is that the participants are all agree that the system here is flawed. That's why it leads to so many problems. The system they created is really wrong. The one who has the most power will become the one who rules, and the system was made more to be an monarchy, since they have the principle that the strongest is the rule. It was participant 3 who said that. And the last thing is that once again, all of the participants agree that what Fire Nation wants to achieve is an outdated way of thinking that exists in the World War period and could not be used in the present. Participant 1 said that we could see from Germany, which they also want to unite the world. There will be always a rebel. And participants 2 also say, I don't think this system will work since different people have different needs and not everyone has the same conditions nor the environment. So at the end of the day, even though it's a United Nations, they will still be built. Okay, so the last finding is the last heading is lesson learned from us. In this heading, I have one question, which is, what are all the violations violated as a nation? All of the interviews acknowledged that Fire nations had many violations, thus each of them states several of those violations. Participant 1 says that in its expansion territory, the Fire nations erased their culture and the freedom to speak out their mind. The governments really silenced its people. And participant 4 says that they attack other nations. They also done the crime of genocide to the aircraft and also the water tribe. They try to erase them. Moving on to discussion. So this research is focused on the watcher of Aula and how the changes in their perspective toward the cartoon after realizing the political aspect there. It is clear today that the Fire Nation is hated so much in the cartoon, and all of my interviewees agree with this. They found some violations that the Fire Nations does, and starting from the genocide, the freedom of speech and such. And it could be called as a colonialism, what the Fire Nations do. And these answers match with an article that's written by Ibrahim, used Canavan theory inside his book. Canavan draws on othering of particular people, which is crucial to their denial of rights, in which individuals would perceive as dangerous and frequently portrayed as such owing to their status as outsiders. Members of other nations are zombified or classified by the Fire Nation, who perceive them as real life colonial objects, who must be subjected to more colonial actions and death. And then in finding the system that the Fire Nations want to implement, which is expand in territorial, all of my interviewees agree that this system will be a failure if it's implemented in the real world. Since some of them think that this system had already done in the past by the Germany Nazi. And when the Germany do its territorial expansion and had the Jews under them, World War II broke out. So I don't believe that this system will be good if it's being implemented in real world. And lastly, after watching Atla, the viewer was more aware of the political aspect in Atla. They can differentiate which aspects that violate the law and which is good. For an example, my participant could say that genocide is bad, killing a whole tribe is a wrong thing, and the goal of the Fire Nation is to unite the states is good, but the execution is terrible. This also featured in Transformal paper in 2018, the title, which with have a title Political Awareness and Measurements, stated that the role of political awareness is to help build standards that make people prefer certain policies. And people outcomes are ideologies, equality, freedom, respect, tolerance, and many more. And these standards are what shape people's perspectives into knowing what is good or bad in politics. It was proven by my interview. Since they have political awareness, they know ethnic cleansing is bad and what the Fire Nation do would be full as a Fire Nation. Okay, so I believe it is already in the end of my presentation. So I will give you the conclusions. Is that this research explained about how Atla can raise awareness among its viewers and how the viewers could point out or realize the political aspect of Atla that they serve as one of their moral values. And this political aspect could be seen from the setting of the story, from how they have different perspective when they perceive Atla as a child and when they grow up, just realize that this person actually already served politics in the beginning. The government system that correlates with the real world, also the violations of law like annexations and genocide they show in the cartoon was realized by all these participants and they can have the same opinion. I think that all of them is wrong. All of them is wrong, and the goal that they want to achieve could not be used. This research proves that Aula is not serving entertainment only, but also political moral that can make people relate and aware of their subject. With the media that can reach all ages, Aula is the most effective tool in making people realize and gain a bit knowledge about the world of politics. Moreover, it has already been proven by the findings of this research that everyone who's watched this cartoon gets to realize and became more sensitive to political issues. According to the results of this research, it is suggested that the research conducted in the future should be on a bigger scale. And the researcher also recommends that the participants in further study could be more varied, not only from international relations majors, in order for the data and the results to become more varied and valid. I guess that's all from me. Thank you for watching my presentation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.